everybody, this is the Marine with Backpacking with a Hammock. In this video today we're going to look at the pros and cons of tent versus the hammock. I have slept in a tent for more than 50 years now, and about a hammock system I've been sleeping in it for about 10 years. First we're going to look at the tent and go over the pros and cons of the tent. Now the tent's been the main source of shelter in the United States and for camping for many years since this great country has started. I have fond memories sleeping in the family's canvas tent up in northern Minnesota. Our family would take trips up every year for 2 weeks up in northern Minnesota, north of Hibbing. While serving in the United States Marine Corps, I was given a piece of canvas with snaps, 3 stakes, and 3 tent poles, and another Marine would have the same. We would snap our 2 pieces together and have on each end our 3 poles and our stakes on each end, and which would form what was called the shelter half. And I slept in a shelter half, which is a modified tent, for many years in the Marine Corps. Then as time went by, nylon material was a rage, and now Cuban fiber is becoming very popular with the materials for tents. And you started off with wooden tent poles, and now you went to fiberglass tent poles, and now carbon is the rage for tents. Lighter, stronger. And the same thing with stakes. We would have wooden stakes, then you went to metal stakes, aluminum stakes, and now carbon and titanium stakes. So everything is getting improved over the years, and it's getting a much lighter and less bulkier. First thing we're going to do is talk about the pros for the tent. They're great sharing with 1 or more person. Oh baby! Number 2, you're readily available and you can find them pretty much anywhere in any department store, even hardware store. Number 3, you can pretty much set them up in every campground. Every campground pretty much in the United States is designed to have tent camping. Hammock could be a problem. Number 4, it holds warmth in most cases because it's totally enclosed. And the cons are, number 1, they're heavy, bulky. But Cuban fiber is taking care of that, so if you get a Cuban fiber, it's not as bad, but if you don't have Cuban fiber, they're very heavy and bulky. 2, they can get very hot and muggy inside, especially if you have another person there. The perspiration and the body heat coming off the other person, that could be a problem. Number 3, they can slide and shift on unlevel ground. Number 4 is condensation. You know, when you breathe out, it gives moisture and it gets trapped in there. And especially if it's cold, it can be a problem with condensation inside your tent. Number 5 is that you need to clear the ground. So when you come in a campsite, even like this, there's twigs, there's rocks, so you have to clear it out and make sure there's no twigs and rocks to get a nice smooth ground. What the? Number 6, it could be cramped and crowded, and if you don't have your spouse and you have someone that maybe you don't like, that's not a good place to be. Number 7, in most cases, you have to crawl around. If you don't have one of those big family tents and you have a backpacking tent, you have to get on your hands and knees and crawl around, and it's really hard on the knees. Number 8 is setting it up in a heavily used site. During a rainstorm, flooding may occur and it can get very muddy. And now this is a tent site. This is a tent pad right there, and you can see how muddy it is. I mean, look at it. Yeah, you want to put a tent on here, this tent pad here. It was about 1 inch of mud. Number 9 is when you're taking it down or setting it up in the rain, it is really hard to keep it dry. And especially if you have, like with the screen part of it, you don't want the rain to get inside the tent. And number 10 is the soil that leave no trace behind. But most cases you're going to go in a campground, you're going to find tent pads. Most campgrounds have tent pads. Most of the time that's not a problem, but if you're going in wilderness camping, that could be a problem. Now we're going to look at the pros and cons of the hammock. The pros of the hammock: number 1, they're very comfortable. I am just comfortable. Number 2, they're very portable and they're very lightweight. 11-foot netless hammock. And that one weighs 12 ounces. Number 3, nothing touches the ground, so everything stays dry and clean. Everything's off the ground. Number 4, they have a separate rain fly or tarp that lets you set up in and out of the rain. Number 5, you sleep above the ground, so there's no spiders or creepy crawly things, snakes, scorpions, or whatever, rodents. You're off the ground, so you don't have them coming in or around. Number 6, there's no rocks or twigs under your back. You're just completely suspended. Number 7, it's very leave no trace behind friendly. Number 8, it's easy to get out and in the morning, especially at nighttime. If I have to go to the bathroom, I get out of this, I just step right up, I go in the bathroom, I get them down and I sit right back in this thing and then flip over and get back in. Very easy to get in and out, especially at my age, getting older. I just don't want to be crawling on my knees. And number 9, the Pro, it's great for rough terrain where it's uneven ground, or there might be rocks and stuff. I could have rocks underneath here and I find 2 trees and I can set up and I don't have to worry about uneven ground or rocky or ground that has a lot of vegetation. I can set up right above it. That's a big pro. I'm all set up in the mud. Backpacking with a hammock, to have a hammock, you can come in this situation where the tent pad is all muddy. You can string up your hammock and you don't have to worry about it. Now the cons for the hammock. Number 1 is you have to have 2 anchor points. Otherwise you have to have a hammock stand. You can come into a campground in a state park like this, and I had to look around and pick a site that had the perfect trees, and most of them did not. So that's a big problem with a hammock if you're going to a state park. Otherwise you have to bring a stand. Another thing about that is if I'm going down in the desert, you can't hang. If there's no trees, you're not going to hang unless you have a stand, and you're not going to carry a stand in when you go backpacking. In a few years, Runner and I are planning a trip to Zion National Park and then the national parks in Utah. And of course, we're not going to be bringing our hammock because there's no trees down there, so we'd have to bring a tent. In most cases, a tent, you would always find a spot where a hammock is very limited, especially if you're down south. But on the flip side of it, a pro is you can come into an area where there's no tent pads or no place to put a tent pad, but there's trees everywhere. But in most cases, a tent, it has an advantage on that. And number 2 is it's not ideal for multiple people. Eno has a double hammock, and I remember my wife would get in there and try to fit in there, and it was very uncomfortable. We can get in there, but man, we're just pinched and on top of each other. It could be good some cases, but most cases, it's not good. Number 3 con is you have to have some type of insulation underneath you, either a mat you sit on or you have an underquilt underneath there. Otherwise, when it gets below 68, it gets cold. So number 4 con, it requires tweaking to get a flat lay. So you have to adjust the suspension to get it right where you want to get a flat lay. You have to get in there and adjust yourself. So what you do is you turn and twist almost like you're trying to get in it sideways. You want to lay asymmetrical in there. And you just shift around until you find yourself flat. So there's a lot of time and adjustment. My son, when I first got a hammock, would say, man, that's a lot of work. But I'll tell you what, I really enjoy it. That's part of the fun for me, is setting it up and getting a different angle, getting the right hang to get the ultimate hang. I really enjoy doing it. So to me, it's not work. It's like eating a pizza. I have a huge pizza. It's a lot of work to eat that pizza, but man, I enjoy it. So the number 5 con, it does not retain heat like a tent would. I would have a tarp over here, but there's so much ventilation coming through here, it does not retain heat at all. If you're cold, if I was to be really cold, I could warm up some water and put it inside my underquilt next to my body. Now, if all things or situations are the same, I'm going to tell you which one I'm going to use over the other and why. If the situation is the same, I'll always use a hammock, and there's 3 main reasons why I would use a hammock if the situation is the same. One of the reasons why I picked the hammock over the tent is that it just relieves achy muscles and back pain. Man, I can't wait to get in that hammock. My back is killing me. I have a lower disc problem and it really flared up, and I know a night in that hammock will be just fine. By tomorrow morning we'll be able to take off again. The hammock conforms your body, and if you set it up properly, I have a video I just made not too long ago that shows you how to do it. You set it up right, man, you sleep just great. I have 2 hip replacements. I have a degenerative disc that is kind of getting bad, and after hiking 12-15 miles, man, my body is just aching. After setting up camp, getting water, getting all the chores done, sometimes I can just barely walk and an ache, and I just climb in a hammock, and the next morning I feel great. It's crazy. After a night in my hammock, I'm rejuvenated, I'm pain-free, well rested, I'm ready for another long day hike. I don't know how it works, but the hammock just conforms to your body. I associate being back in the mother's womb. I mean, I am just, when I wake up in the next morning, I feel great. You guys, when I'm in a tent and on my back and twisting and turning, there's no pressure points in here, and I think that's probably one of the reasons. It conforms your body, and there's just no pressure points on there. And if you, like I said, if you sleep in there properly, when I'm in the tent and I have a 3-inch air mattress, I twist and I turn, and when I have to crawl out, I'm on my hands and knees getting out of the tent and then getting back in, crawling in, adjusting myself. This, I just sit right in there, flip right in there, and I'm telling you guys, I don't know how to explain it, but it is wonderful. Everyone that I know that switched from tent to a hammock and they sleep in there and they lay in there properly, they will agree that it is much more comfortable. But the problem is you have to have trees. The number 2 reason why I prefer a hammock over the tent is setting up in the rain. But say I come in the area, it's pouring out, I'm cold, I'm wet, I get in the campsite, I put my 2 straps on each end, and what I do is I take my tarp, with a tent, either you wait for the rain to stop or you set it up in the rain. It's almost impossible to set up a tent during a rainstorm. And then to get your pack and your clothes and to get your sleeping bag in there without things getting wet, you got to climb in there. If you have the vestibule, that helps a lot. And just to get in there and keep everything dry is a challenge. And then waking up in the morning and then taking things down in the rain and putting things back into your pack without it getting wet is really a challenge. With a hammock, you don't have that. Now I just deployed my tarp, I got it set up, I'm out of the rain. I have my wet clothes. What I'll do is take my pack and I'll take out my dry clothes, take off the wet clothes and put on my dry clothes, and I'm underneath a tarp where it's not getting wet. So I can easily stand up, put my clothes on. I'm not in a cramped tent. Once I get my clothes on, I'm nice and dry. What I'll do is I'll put my hammock up, I'll strap them up and put it in here and set everything up, and I'm underneath this tarp and everything's staying dry. As soon as we got in here, we set up our tarp, sat down, changed our clothes, set up the hammock underneath there nice and dry and very comfortable. And when I take down in the morning, it's great. If it's still raining in the morning, it's all raining, I'll take everything down in the rain here and put everything in the pack. Everything stays dry when I take down. Nothing gets wet. The only thing that's wet is a tarp, and that's the last thing I take down. I'll have my rain jacket on. I'll take down the tarp and I'll put it in this pouch here, which is on the outside. Nothing gets wet. It's really a slick way. This is what's great about backpacking with a hammock. Here we took everything down. Now we got this big tarp here, eating our breakfast. Got everything packed. People around here, there's probably about 30 people around here that have tents, and they're just sitting in their tents waiting for the rain to stop. We're pretty much ready to go. And the third reason why I prefer a hammock over the tent, if all situations are the same, if it rains without stopping while in camp, with a tent either you have to go in the rain to cook or you go inside your tent and you cook with the vegetable out there and cook it out there, which is kind of uncomfortable, cramping, and very uncomfortable. If we were in tents, we'd be sitting in our tents miserable using our vegetables to do our cooking, where here we can just sit underneath our tarp and do all our getting watered, cooking, sitting back with each other talking, not smelling each other. And then for kicking back in a tent with more than one person, it could be cramped in there, hot, muggy, smelly. But with a hammock, you don't have that problem. So now I got everything set up. It's still raining. What I can do now is I can get out my cook kit, get that out there. I can cook my food here. The lights right up. I can eat. I can kick back. I can sit here and read. It's raining out. I'm not getting wet. I got a beautiful view. Amazed by the view. This probably could be one of the best things I had as far as the view. It's just gorgeous. That's what I'm looking out at, Lake Superior. Just kicking back, and usually I have a runner with me or someone else. They'd be near here. I can sit and talk to them. Anything wet?
No.
Yep.
Nothing's wet. Why wouldn't I be? Nice tarp over the top here. High and dry. Enjoying my morning Joe.
We just kick back and just enjoy the view. If it's raining, it doesn't bother us one bit. I got great ventilation in here. I'm not getting hot or muggy. I'm not smelling my partner. I'm just kicking back and having a great time. I've been up in the winter time and it started raining, and it was just not a problem at all because I stayed nice and dry underneath here. It started just pouring real heavy, and as you can see out here, it's still drizzling pretty hard. And a lot of people think that with this rain it's kind of miserable, but really it isn't. You know, you're underneath this tarp, and that's what's great with backpacking with the hammock. You got this tarp, we call it porch mode, where it's sticking out, so I can have a nice little view, kick back here, look at the wildlife. Yeah, it's just, you know, so what if it rains? We're having a good time just kicking back, relaxing, enjoying the view. It's beautiful up here. Well, this concludes our video. I hope you found it insightful and helpful. If you have any comments or questions, please write them down below. I'd love to hear from you. This is the Marine with Backpacking with the Hammock, signing off.